Let's start with a story. It was the summer of 1980, and I was working with my uncle who's a builder in Naperville. And as I had done a million times before, I bent over to pick up a 2x4 at the lumberyard. We were getting some supplies, and this time I was met with excruciatingly sharp pain in my low back, as if someone had just stabbed me with a 10-inch dagger. Could barely stand up. I'm 17 years old. The next morning I could not move. I could not even get out of bed without assistance. And so you go to the orthopedic surgeon, they take the x-rays, they get the diagnosis, and he said, Mr. Wolf, you have a spondylolisthesis of the fifth lumbar vertebrae. Now, we're going to talk just a little bit about spinal anatomy tonight, not a ton, but what that basically is the bottom of my low back, the fifth lumbar vertebra, is slightly deformed. He said, this is congenital. You were born with this. It can happen different ways, but the little wings on those vertebrae that sort of go out to the side that to some degree control its movement are slightly deformed. So mine slides forward when it wants to, pushes on those nerve roots, and it is like a knife in your back. So it's crippling. And at that time, you know, you're young, you're 17, you're essentially bulletproof. You can do anything you want until you meet this experience. And he said, you have 3 to-dos. You do these 3 things and you'll probably be okay. You'll be able to manage your life without too much trouble. We won't need to do surgery, etc. He said, number 1, don't gain weight. That will mess up your back. 2, keep those muscles of the abdominal wall and back strong and healthy. That will prevent the spine from moving around. And 3, don't jump off tall buildings. So I said, well, I can promise one of those. But so I've had 37 years of practice of a back healthy lifestyle that we'll talk about the to-dos of tonight. And I certainly want to invite you to sort of chime in as you'd like to, but we're going to start by looking at what I like to call 3 things that you should know. Here's 3 things that anyone who says, hey, I'm concerned about my back health, my spine health, and or I want to protect it from getting worse. What should I know? These are 3 things that we should all know. Several action steps. It's all about execution, isn't it? If you go to a presentation and you hear good advice, you think, well, that was great to learn that stuff, but you never do anything about it, it really doesn't matter. So the goal being tonight that you have some actionable steps that you can actually implement when you walk out the door. And lastly, since most of you are training here at Med Fitness, what are some things to pay attention to in your workout? We do train the spinal muscles here at Med Fitness, and so how can you maximize the safety of the workout? What things should you be aware of to make sure that you can go through a good, challenging, tough workout, but not be compromising back health and putting your spine in jeopardy? And I can tell you without a doubt, it's the one area that we tend to be conservative in. Nobody wants to say, yes, I got a little stronger, but now my back is killing me all the time. Nobody wants that. So we want to keep the workout sort of spine friendly, spine healthy at all times under all conditions. So we'll walk about some things, and I'm going to give you a couple recommended reading assignments, a couple books if you want to read a little more, 2 excellent resources for how to care for your back as well. Okay? So 3 things. Let's start with 3 things that everyone should know. An unhealthy musculoskeletal system increases your risk for back disease, dysfunction, and pain. Let me repeat that. An unhealthy musculoskeletal system increases your risk for back dysfunction, disease, and pain. So what is a musculoskeletal system? What is the musculoskeletal system? It's a bunch of things. It's your skeleton. It's your entire skeleton. It is, of course, your muscles. It is the tendons that attach the muscles to the bones. It's the ligaments that attach the bones to bones. And then it's a connective tissue we call the fascia, which is a thin layer of connective tissue which functions to produce planes of separation in your body between organs and muscles. And so all these guys collectively are the musculoskeletal system. So if you say, hey, I injured my low back and the tendons are loose, how do I exercise my tendons? What can I do about that? Or the muscles are weak. How can I get those muscles to be stronger? Or the bones are demineralizing. What can I do about that? I'm seeing some compression fractures and some kyphosis because of my osteoporosis. Well, how do I do this? What do I do about an unhealthy musculoskeletal system? Well, the answer is that the muscles are the doorway to the whole system. So for ladies here, you know this all too well, right? If you're trying to avoid osteoporosis, we call it bone builder, but really, how do you get at your bones? You exercise your muscles. That's how you make your bones healthier. How do you make the connective tissues healthier? If you have weak or inflexible tendons, tight tendons, how do you get those to function better? You exercise your muscles. How do you get the ligaments to be stronger? You exercise your muscles. So my point here is that if you have any dysfunction, any weakness, any impaired capacity of the musculoskeletal system, any of those tissues at all, the doorway to make them healthier is training your muscles, which of course is exactly what we do here. We train the muscular system with, scientists would call this, what would they call it? Who knows? What do we call what we do here? We call it strength training. That's kind of the layman's term for it, but technically what is it called? Who knows? No answers, okay, all right. Resistance exercise. You've heard that term before, resistance exercise. If you read about it in scientific journals, we call it resistance exercise. And so we use machines here because they're so safe, but you can use body weight to do resistance exercise, you can use dumbbells, you can do bands, all kinds of ways to do resistance exercise. But training the muscles with resistance exercise is a way to make your bones healthier, your tendons healthier, your ligaments healthier, the fascia healthier, everything in the system, the muscles themselves healthier. So there's no special sort of spine exercise. It's always through the doorway of the muscular system. With me so far? Okay. So we know that an unhealthy muscular system contributes to dysfunction and disease. We know that the muscles are the doorway to healthier tissue. What should I know about where I'm at with my muscular system? Well, I'm 53, so we start losing muscle in our late 30s. We achieve peak bone mass at about 35. About 90% of that is achieved at age 20. So ladies, you achieve most of your bone mass by your early 20s. You can continue to grow a little bit over the next decade, but then it tops out maybe mid-30s max, and then it's all a downhill slide from there. Same thing for men. So it accelerates, of course, at menopause, right? So ladies, you go through menopause and we see the rate of bone demineralization accelerates for about 10 years during that time. And so we know that this begins in mid-30s for men and women, and it never stops. Thanks for coming tonight. I'll see you next week, so, okay? It really is sort of doom and gloom, isn't it? You think about, wow, man, I'm 53. This is really a steep downhill slide I'm on here. Well, again, the good news is that we didn't know this until probably the early 80s. Is that how old are you, Ed?
61.
So Ed's 61, and we recognized this in the early 80s, but it really was never communicated to anyone. We always thought, how many of you tell me if you know this? We always thought that, boy, once you get past a certain age, certainly 61, my goodness, at 61, I mean, there's no hope, right? There just is no hope. You just got to keep your fingers crossed, and maybe you can avoid the bullets on the way down, right? It's amazing. But in the early 80s, we discovered that if we train these 61-year-old guys and gals, their muscles get stronger and they get bigger. And in fact, it never changes. Men and women in their late 90s can triple their strength in three months of productive strength training. Get rid of canes, get rid of walkers, all these assistive devices that we become dependent upon. So the point is that we start losing in the mid-30s, and it accelerates as you age. We sometimes have clients who leave, and maybe they're in Florida or wherever they go for the winter, and they come back and say, my goodness, I didn't strength train when I was gone, and why do these weights feel so heavy? The rate at which you lose muscle accelerates as you age. And so if I miss 6 months of training at my age, I'm losing muscle, but it's not as bad for someone who's 53 or 63 or 73. So that muscle turnover, that breakdown goes faster and faster. I was at a presentation just over a year ago at Rush University. One of probably the most prolific scientists in exercise science is a guy out of Duke. His name is Bill Evans, and he was at Tufts University for many years. He did a lot of the original research in the 80s on people aging and muscle growth. And Dr. Evans said he had headed up a study where they put adults in their 80s on bed rest for 10 days and measured muscle breakdown. In 10 days of bed rest for adults in their 80s is equivalent to a year of muscle loss. That's how fast we lose muscle as we age. And so we're coming back to the point that, well, okay, back up to what we said about your spine pain and dysfunction, etc. If I want to keep that healthy, I've got to be strength training, but I've just got to do it forever. There is no timeout, unfortunately. And the comparison I make is with nutrition. You would never say, if you're 60, you would say, well, now I've reached 60. Now all bets are off. I'm just going to eat junk food from here on out. We might think that, but we know it's not going to help us live well, right? We know that I have to at least pay some attention. Greg is good about asking questions about nutrition, so we want to make sure he's doing the right thing. He knows that he can't just eat ding-dongs for breakfast every day for the rest of his life and have Debbie train him. So, but same thing with strength training, right? Yeah. We have to do this behavior, but we've got to essentially do it for the rest of our life. So we call it a forever behavior. So what have we said here? An unhealthy musculoskeletal system increases risk for back disease and dysfunction and pain. Number 2, how do I train that system? I train the muscles. That's the doorway to get at all those tissues. 3, we start to lose that muscle in our 30s, but we can always regain it. There is never a time that muscles don't respond to stimulus. They always respond to stimulus. This is very different than what we thought when I was growing up. Very different. So it's good news. No matter what age you are, you always have your health in your own hands. So it really is a positive message despite feeling like you're on a downhill slope. So, okay. You guys with me? Okay. So what are some simple action steps, things that you can be doing right off the bat? Well, one of the biggest risk factors for back dysfunction and pain is inactivity, believe it or not. Inactivity, the more you sit, in fact, sitting produces more pressure on your spine than standing does. So the more you sit, the more hours you're inactive every day, the greater the risk for back dysfunction. And we call this specific disuse atrophy. So if you've heard the term, right? If you don't use the muscles, you lose them, they go away. It's absolutely true. Think about it in America. Why is it that Grandma sits on the porch while Johnny cuts the grass and he's out there working, pushing the lawnmower? Meanwhile, Grandma sits on the porch, her bones are demineralizing, her tendons are drying up, becoming stiff, her muscles are atrophying, becoming weak. Her entire system is essentially decomposing as she sits and watches her grandson. It's really a gruesome thought, but it's true. And so in the United States, of course, this is a cultural pattern. It's not a necessity of biology. Her bones don't have to go through that as she's aging. Her muscles don't have to go through that as she's aging. But it is a cultural pattern. It's imposed, it's learned, it's reinforced. And so today, think about it. Who would have ever guessed? My grandpa was 96 when he was strength training with us before he passed. Who would have ever said, at the end of the day, you're going to go into this room, these 4 walls, and these people are going to make you do a lot of hard work. They're going to lift heavy things up and down, and you're actually going to pay them to go do that at the end of the day. So it's the opposite of what we would have thought 50, 60, 70 years ago. But this disuse atrophy, the sitting disease, again, completely culturally imposed. Now in companies, they have stand breaks. You know what a stand break is? I'm not talking about getting a snack. I'm saying just stand up because it is so damaging for your body to sit for 3 hours straight. We just want you to stand, Linda. Please stand. That's what we're doing to try to offset some of these negative things to our body. So number 1, practice active rest is what we're saying. Practice active rest. It was about 2000. No, it was a little before 2000. Harvard University had sponsored a conference on cancer and physical activity. And they coined this phrase back then. You still hear scientists referring to it. They came up with the phrase sedentary exercisers. They were studying these exercisers and want to look between the relationship of cancer and physical activity. And what they discovered is that there's a group of people they call sedentary exercisers in America. Well, what is this sedentary exercise? It doesn't seem to go together. This is how good we are in America at being inactive. We will go to the fitness center, we will circle the parking lot and wait for the front row parking spots to open up. Park right there, walk 10 feet, go up an escalator in some cases, into the fitness center, go do my half-hour workout, go down the escalator, get into my car, drive home, go sit on the couch and turn the TV back on. That's how we have become sort of conditioned to be sedentary exercises in America. Of course, that's not what we're recommending, but we want you to avoid this quote-unquote sitting disease, which has become more and more prevalent in the United States. So, I mean, the great thing, isn't it true? You come here and you strength train, why not use your muscles, right? Why not use your muscles? That's when they're at their best. Whatever it is you like to do, whether it's messing around in the yard or whatever it is, a bike ride, you name it, but use your muscles. Use them because you've built them and you deserve to have them. So, okay, so practice active rest, that's step number one. Avoid overemphasizing core training. This is almost sacrilegious for me to even say this in the fitness industry. Avoid overemphasizing core training. Core training in America has become the solution to every problem known to mankind for some reason. Your ear hurts, do some core training. Your bank account is low, do some core training. You want a new job, do some core training. So it has become so over-talked and so over-prescribed. We're not saying that those muscles aren't important. My abdominal muscles are clearly important. My erector spinae muscles, critical. Those transverse abdominal, all critical muscles. But what has happened in America is we've taken a nutrition concept and applied it to exercise, and it really costs us. We've taken this reductionist attitude. The problem in nutrition is what? Every month there's a new nutrient to focus on, right? Well, this month it's sugar, then it's fiber, then it's vitamin C, then it's beta carotene. We never step back for 3 seconds and look at the big picture. Our body is a system. We need to pay attention to the whole system. We can't have this sort of reductionist attitude and say, hey, let me just focus on the elbow and see what happens to the rest of your body. But that's how we approach it in America. We zone in on one little tiny thing and we ignore everything else. So the point with core training is that you can train those muscles. Of course it's important, and we work them directly and indirectly here. But it doesn't mean I avoid the deltoids and the quadriceps and the hamstrings and the pectoral, all the other muscle groups. Why would you ever say, hey Linda, yeah, let's make your core stronger. By the way, let's ignore everything else and just focus on the core. That's going to create enormous imbalances and inconsistencies. And so always the rule of thumb here. Train your whole body all the time. There's never a time to say, hey Greg, your shoulders are so much in shape, I want to skip them for the next 3 years and just work on your rectus abdominis. That's ridiculous. It goes against human physiology. So yes, we can train the core, we can address those muscles, but make it part of a full body workout. I see trainers making this mistake. We're going to do some core training. Well, okay, but why would you ignore key important parts of the system? Again, it's a very reductionist attitude. It doesn't mean that there might not be some therapeutic application. Maybe you did have some physical therapy. Maybe you did have an injury and you need to do a little additional work on an area. That's fine, but continue to keep the system healthy. I mean, when has a doctor said to you, now Gary, we're going to try to tighten your diet up a little bit. I want you to get more fruit in your diet, so pay attention to the fruit. By the way, those French fries that you eat on the weekend, see if you can't raise those a little bit. See if you can't increase your consumption of French fries. The doctor doesn't say that, do they? But that's what this is, this mindset of one single thing I'm going to focus on. Okay? You with me on that? I am going against the grain by saying don't worry about your core here. Train your whole body. Your core gets worked on almost every exercise in the studio. Almost every exercise, your core is engaged. Now well, I'll get to it in just a second. Okay, so we don't want to overemphasize the core. We want to train the entire body. And then number 3 here is to avoid AB Mania. Do you know what AB Mania is? It's been going on for decades. AB Mania is the unending obsession with abdominal exercises on a daily basis. It's kind of like a badge of honor in the United States. You ask someone, hey, where do you work? Oh, good company, my goodness. Where did you guys vacation? Oh, wow, that was a nice vacation. How many sit-ups did you do? 600. It's like this badge of honor that we have to wear to say, I did a 7-hour plank. and I did 400 sit-ups, and I did 6,000 side bends. In what physiology textbook did that come out of? That is simply old information that should have been put to bed many years ago. If I biopsied Greg's abdominal wall, and I go through the painful process of a biopsy, I use a needle to pull some muscle out and then put that under an electron microscope and look at that muscle tissue. If I did his abdominal wall, I would see that it's the same as his pectoral, his chest. I'd also see that it's the same as his quadricep, his hamstring, and his gluteal. The muscles are all identical. They're what we call striated skeletal muscle. We've got two kinds of muscles in our body, smooth and striated. So we'd see he's got the striated muscle in his abs, his shoulders, his biceps. It's all identical. It's all the same. It responds to the same stress. So you know, right, Greg, if you train your biceps hard and you eat well and you rest enough, you can gain strength. I can get muscle tone, muscle size. Muscles respond to, as we just said, they respond to that workout. The abs do the same way. The abs are no different. The idea that I should train my abs is 100% unscientific. How many people do you see, and you see this in gyms all over the place, doing set after set after set after set and repetition after, they're in there, I'll train my whole body. They're still working their abs when I walk out the door. You know, they were there for a half hour. They've just finished their ab workout a half hour later. So train your abdominal wall the same as you would your shoulders or your hips. They are physiologically identical to those muscles. Again, there's a lot of urban legends, a lot of myths from days past about they're resistant to growth. I got to train them daily. Unscientific 110% of the time. So do not get caught up in doing ab work every single day. They need time to rest. If your abs are going to get stronger, if it's going to keep your spine in place, I got to stimulate it, fatigue it, now let it rest and recover. It gets stronger the same way your shoulders get stronger and your hips and your quadriceps. It's all the same. So you don't need a regular workout and then say, now I'm going to go do my 6-hour ab workout on a daily basis. So this is a great time saver for people to get caught up in this process. So, and listen, it happens here too. People come in, you know, why does my abdominal crunch feel so hard? Well, I just got done doing my ab workout this morning before I came in. Your ab workout? Why are you doing an ab workout when we're starting on abdominal crunch? So it happens everywhere. Even when we tell them, Libby, don't go do things. You could do yard work. I don't care if you're building a new house, but don't go exercise your muscles outside of Med Fitness when we're doing everything we can to get you to go to the edge, you know, of the cliff here in the studio. So, all right. Question, Greg. I mean, sometimes people, because planks are so popular these days, sometimes they'll do it as just sort of almost a strength of test to see, okay, I used to be able to do a 3-minute plank. Let me see if I can do 4 minutes or 4 or 5, whatever it is. Sometimes people do that, and that's okay if you just want to see what your physical capacity is. But no need, if you're in here and your abs are being obliterated twice a week in a strength workout, like I know they are, why would you do planks on another day? Yeah. Right. No, it's a valid question though, because people do it. They do it all the time. We have, again, this relates to a lot of things in America. We always think that more is better. Certainly not the true when it comes to muscular fitness. Because if that was true, Ron, I should have you work out every day. In fact, twice a day, every day. We should see your biceps get bigger every time you work out. If that was true, I should be able to do a workout, bigger, stronger. The next workout, bigger, stronger. How you guys know that's not true, right? You know how hard it is to train and get a small increase in strength, increase in muscle tone. Bodies don't like to build muscle. Let's not fool ourselves. We are not the 1%ers here. Do not confuse yourselves, your DNA, with the DNA of the men and women you see in magazines. They are living on a different planet. They have different DNA. They've got a ton of drugs, and they've got, you know, the artists making themselves look good in the magazine. So we are it's about 90% of adults on the planet are what we call average responders. We can work super hard at, but you and I are not going to get biceps like Arnold Schwarzenegger no matter what we do. It will not happen. We don't have the muscle fiber types that Arnold has. So don't compare yourself to the guy in the article who's got these shredded abs, who does 6 hours of abs training. He's came from a different planet, and he's got a ton of drugs. So don't worry about those guys. We're average responders, work hard, get out of the gym, go rest and recover and live your life. But yes, it's a good question, Ray, because it does come up. Yeah, I wouldn't do any planks. I mean, were you thinking that that was going to enhance your abdominal strength?
Well, that's why I'm hearing you say not to, but my thought was to. But
yeah, right. I mean, if you're doing 2 good tough workouts, like I know you are, let those muscles rest. Let them recover. Yes, exactly right. So. Okay, so we've said practice active rest, avoid sitting disease. That's the number 2 risk factor for back pain is sitting too much. It's amazing inactivity. And it's more damaging as we age. If Libby sits for an hour, her back hurts more than mine does at 53, even with my spondylolisthesis. So yeah, so as we get older, it's more damaging. So avoid sitting disease. Don't overemphasize the core. Train your whole body. And then avoid AB Mania. You'll be saving a ton of time. You'll be able to take up a new career. So, okay. All right, so what about your workout here? Okay. What are some things we're doing? We have 2 ways to train your abs or your core. We can get it directly by contracting the muscles that make up the front and back and sides of your torso, or we can do it indirectly by doing a different exercise that requires these muscles to stabilize the spine. So what's a good example? Abdominal crunch. If you get an abdominal crunch, we're working the rectus abdominis, right? The top layer of muscles on your waist. And so that's a direct way to work your trunk, but also I could do seated dip is a good example. If you do seated dip properly and you lean forward, guess what muscles have to contract to keep the spine in this flexed position? Your abdominal wall has to contract statically. It's like a sitting plank, right, if you want to make a comparison. So it's like you're doing a plank on that exercise besides the shoulder and chest and tricep work. So we can work your core directly, or we can work it indirectly with other exercises. Exercises that work it indirectly would be leg curl, leg press, chest press, compound row, lateral raise. Everything on the A-line works it directly. Imagine if you had no muscles here or here, your spine literally would fall apart. It would just fall apart. So they have to be contracting statically is what we call that. They're not lengthening or shortening, but they're contracting statically to keep the spine where it belongs. All right. Same thing on the B-line. You're getting a lot of trunk work on seated dip. You're getting a lot of trunk work on pull down, overhead press. Of course, low back, that's direct work, right? Because I'm rotating, I'm working the erector spinae muscles, go right up the vertebral column, so spinal column. So those are deep muscles. So that's a direct exercise. But then how many of you have ever done adduction? You started on the last machine, the last 1 or 2, you do them, and then you go to abs and you wonder, why does this feel so heavy? Because your abs get worked indirectly on adduction significantly. So again, almost every exercise is getting your core, directly or indirectly. So you have 2 ways to get at it, but I want to talk about abs, low back, lateral raise, and overhead press real quickly. So on the abs, what's the right way to do it? First thing you want is your legs abducted out as far as you can go to the side. We've actually retrofitted that machine. We took the leg spreader off of that machine. It used to have pads. I don't know if any of you remember this. It used to have pads that would spread your legs out for you. You'd be in this position with your legs way out. Then the belt would get cinched in tight. Then we'd get started with the exercise. But now, because we don't have those pads, people start with their legs in front of them. So I want your hips abducted out. Why is this? Because it eliminates the lower body. It gets us to focus on the rectus abdominis muscle. So I get a better targeted contraction by spacing my legs out like this. And I mean out. I don't mean just, 3 inches out. I mean get them out as far as you can go. As far as you can go. And then put that belt tight on the pelvis. People joke about the belt. It's not there because you're going to fall off the machine. No one's ever fallen off the machine. It's there because when you do it right, you're pushing your spine into the pad. You're doing a pelvic tilt. And so I want your pelvis anchored. I don't want it moving. I want the rectus abdominis to do all the muscle to flex the spine forward. I don't want your hips shifting. So I want them cemented into place. That's all. So just get it as tight as you can comfortably get it. Most people are pretty good, but sometimes get up there and I'll yank it down just a little tighter to keep them secure. So legs out, tight belt, and the range of motion that's ideal on that one to really get those muscles is ridiculously short. It's ridiculously short. The best way to do it wrong is just to go too far. And so if you're on the machine, how many of you have ever thought this before? You say, boy, I wonder if I should stop here or just keep going just a little bit. I feel like I can crunch just a little more. Typically, if you're asking yourself, should I stop? That's where you should stop. Don't go a hair further. Stop right there. That's the rule that we practice. So if you think you've gone too far, you have gone too far. So if you're questioning it, stop right there, and you'll be better off. So it does not take much to contract that abdominal wall. So super short. How many of you guys know this? When your trainer's there right on you, why does that 5th and 6th rep feel so hard? Because they're just stopping you where you should stop, and that if you go too far, you're actually resting a little bit. So we keep the tension and the stimulus high on the abdominal wall when we do that. So legs out, tight belt, short range of motion. Those are the keys to that guy. What about low back extension? How do I keep it safe and productive? Well, again, hips all the way back against that pad. So jam your hips against that back pad. Then when you get into that machine, right, lean back without the weight, correct? Lean back without the weight. Then get the belt in from that angle. Who did I do tonight? Who was in here tonight and they leaned back? No, someone else. And someone knew I was teaching the low back, and I said, now, she cinched the belt in the upright position. I said, now, take the pin out, lean back. Oh, it was completely loose. And so what happens then? The hips start to slide forward. And so now my pelvis, which is supposed to be fixed and stationary, is sliding forward. So I'm changing the stress on the spine completely. I want it fixed right where I start, and I want those muscles to be able to contract forward and backwards. So hips back, lean back, cinch it up, then come forward and put your pin in. Then you begin your exercise. Okay, so again, I realize not everyone is the same size. As snug as you can comfortably make it, but make it good and snug. Keep that pelvis anchored. Once you start, you don't want your body moving in that machine. So you want it to be stable. You don't want your hips floating back and forth as you're trying to push 200 pounds back off the weight stack. So short range of motion. And the other thing is feet all the way down on the foot pedal. Tuck them down at the bottom of that foot pedal, not halfway up, all the way up, but put them all the way down. I want your knees above your pelvis on that exercise. So what this does is it neutralizes your legs. If you feel like, and you can tell your trainer, feel free to tell your trainer, because I ask people all the time, if you feel like, oh, when I push back, I feel my legs pushing, feel it's pushing off the foot pedal, we can tweak those settings and bring your knees a little higher to neutralize that pushing and really engage those erector spinae muscles, which is what we're trying to do. So you'll always get a little bit of pushing because they have to keep your body there, but we're trying to minimize that. So feet all the way down, rotate out. And the last thing on that is just keep your head stationary, keep your head fixed. When you're doing that exercise, Greg, as you go back, you shouldn't watch the clock. You should take your eyes off the clock. You should be looking at the ceiling. So as you're going backwards, your head stays with your body. You should be looking straight up, and then as they come back down, I see it. So no need to watch the clock the whole time. Don't worry about that. Keep your head neutral and stationary. Let it go with your body. So don't worry too much about the clock. Okay, lateral raise, everyone's favorite here. Why am I concerned about lateral raise and overhead press? Because those are the only two exercises where we load the coaxial skeleton in the studio here. So what do I mean by that? The coaxial skeleton is your skull and your vertebral column. And so we know when I put a heavy weight here on Linda's shoulders, let's say she was doing a barbell squat and I put a big 200-pound barbell back on her shoulders. I'm putting 200 pounds of force on the vertebral column. Now that's okay if you're 20. How old are you, Linda? 30?
Yeah, something like that, about 3 times.
Okay.
74.
Wow, my goodness, you look great for 74. So
That's because I come here.
well, of course, right. But so it's very different, right? I won't go through all the reasons, but a 74-year-old spine can't handle 200 pounds of compressive force the way a 20-year-old spine can. Again, think of who you're looking at in the magazines and a lot of the books. It's young studs, it's young men and women who could, walk through a brick wall if they had to. So I don't want to load your spine with 200 pounds. But when I do lateral raise and I'm lifting, maybe it's 40 pounds, Where is that load transferred? To the vertebral column. Same thing with overhead press. When you push overhead, Libby, that's transferred directly to your vertebral column. So anytime we do those exercises, we want to make sure the spine is in the safest position possible. So what is the safest position? neutral. And so what does neutral look like? The spine has a natural curvature to it, right? Your spine isn't straight. The spine has a natural curvature to it. So if I look at the spine just like this, see how, I mean, you've all seen this picture in the magazines or the books, right? See how it sort of curves up here, curves in, and then curves back, right? I want it in that position. This is a good position because then the pressure on the discs is evenly distributed. I'm not extending and putting more pressure on one side with the heavy load pushing a disc out. So I want it in a natural curvature. So how do you do that? On overhead press, keep your butt at the end of the seat. All right? You don't have to touch the frame, but scooch it back. Men make this mistake much more often than women. They let their hips slide forward. And then they're like this. Their hips are way out and they're pressing overhead. It's terrible on your low back, terrible force on the low back. So keep your rear end on the edge of the seat and your shoulder blades against the pad, right? That will keep the spine where it belongs. Same thing for overhead press or lateral raise. People, they let their butt go out and they let their shoulders go out. So imagine if Debbie is, if she's here and if this is the pad, I'm sometimes just looking at people's shoulder blade to see if it's back on the pad, and I put my hand here to keep them from drifting forward. People fatigue, they sometimes drift away. Again, now I'm completely changing the arc of that spine, and so now the pressure is different on those intervertebral discs. So let it be in its normal curvature, just the way we talked about it, shoulders back. And really, what is it? It's good posture. If you said, how do you stand? There's a way to stand with good posture. I want your posture to be good on those two because we are loading the coaxial skeleton. Everything else, we are not putting direct force on the vertebral column. That's the great thing about low back. I can train those muscles, but I'm not putting 100 pounds of force on your shoulders down. We're not doing it. It's a great way to get those muscles without crushing your spine at the same time. So, okay? Everyone with me? Okay. Okay, so really what have we said here tonight? What's that? Yeah. Yeah. Avoid sitting disease. Critical, critical, critical. Keep the muscles healthy because they're the doorway to the musculoskeletal system. We could give you a long list of dangerous, painful diseases that occur in the spine because your muscles are weak. Remember, what is your main shock-absorbing system? We didn't mention it tonight, but what is it on your body that absorbs and dissipates shock and ground reaction force? When I step, there's force into my hip and my knee and my spine. What dissipates that force? Your muscles dissipate that force. As your muscles get smaller and weaker, less of that force is dissipated, more of it goes through the weight-bearing surfaces of the skeleton. So it makes sense as people get older and they're weaker, it's hard to take a walk because my knees hurt, my hips hurt, my spine hurts, my shock-absorbing system is gone. So keep your muscles strong to keep your shock-absorbing system there, and then be attentive to the form details. And this is what we're here to do. We're always coaching on these things, but it's good for you guys to be reinforced on, good neutral spine, on those coaxial loading exercises, how to do abs right, how to do low back right, and how to save yourself time by not getting obsessed with daily ab training and all the craziness that brings into our world. So, I've said a lot, but I haven't said everything. There's a ton of things I haven't covered tonight relative to spine health. I'm going to recommend 2 books. If you're someone who's a reader and you want to read just a little more, the 2 that I'm recommending, one is the American Physical Therapy Association's Body Maintenance Handbook. This is a great book. Stretches, exercises, etc. Good basics of understanding how your whole body works, much less your spine. And another one, Treat Your Own Back by Robin McKenzie. He is a prolific scientist in the area of physical therapy. He has since passed, but multiple certifications exist by Robin for physical therapists who specialize in things. I know that our good friend and colleague down the street at ATI Physical Therapy, Jim Horlock has a McKinsey certification in back physical therapy. So this is a fantastic book. It's an easy read. Both of these you can get on Amazon for probably $2. But if you want to learn a little more or have just a good resource in your library, those are 2 good, reliable, professionally well-written resources for back and spinal health. On that note, I am going to thank you for your time tonight. If you have any other small questions, lingering thoughts, I'm here, but I do appreciate you coming in. What is the purpose of why we do these lectures? One, we want you to get the best value for your time here, of course, but we want you to be informed enough to make strength training a forever behavior. We know that it's a health habit. We know that it makes a huge difference in your life. The more you know, we find the more, we call it, the more you get it, the more likely you are to train, whether it's with us, on your own, it doesn't matter, but we want to make this health habit a forever behavior in your lifestyle. Thank you for your time, guys, and we will see you next time. All right?
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. All right.